What's going on, everyone? This is Brady Harrington, and you are listening to the Pump Podcast. Pump stands for Prepare Ultimate Mental Performance. This episode is brought to you by Hoop Culture. Hoop Culture is your off-the-court, unique and authentic basketball streetwear. You can use our 10% off code HCFAM-pump. I repeat, HCFAM-pump to receive 10% off your next order. If you have any questions after the episode or you want to reach out for new ideas, please reach out to Harrington, HARRINGTON, pump@gmail.com, or you can reach out to our Instagram page, PUMP_pod. I really appreciate you giving this a listen. Hope you enjoy. Thank you. Rolling. What's going on, everyone? This is episode 13. We got a football guy in here now. First time I got a football guy in. I'm very excited to get a whole other background yet again. We got Isaac Hadac on. He is an alum from Green, right down the road from Whitney Point. Cool to make another connection right down Route 79. Isaac, thanks for hopping on, man. How you doing?
Yeah, great, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's going to be awesome. So just a little bit like with your background and what intrigued me a lot to have you on here and have a great conversation about what you're doing. For starters, you're a very, very decorated football player through going from high school and into college. And on top of that, with your profession now. So just give me a little background. After your high school graduation, what was your experience like playing wise?
Like in college?
Yeah. Just a little brief background on what you went through.
Yeah, so I obviously played all over the place, played at 4 different schools, played Division I, Division II, and Division III. Committed to Wagner University very late in my senior year, around February. It was a very stressful time, the recruitment process. Once you're a senior in football and you get past the new year, you get past both the signing days, you're like, oh man, I got to find a spot. So I found that spot down there, was able to go down there in a preferred walk-on and went down there and had an opportunity, made the most of it. Didn't love the facility, the place, the area. I mean, I'm a country boy, like Green, New York, grew up on a dirt road. And I went down to the Big Apple to play football, and all of a sudden you're the biggest dude on the team and Green, and then you go to college and you're like one of the smallest dudes on the team, and I'm like, now I'm the smallest dude on the team. I'm in the most populated area I've ever been in my life. Like it was pretty overwhelming. It was definitely a wake up call for me, for sure, going down.
Yeah, no, and I think that's something too with just recruits in general, kids going from high school to college. They need to realize that no matter how good they do, I mean, obviously a big fish, small pond type of situation like you mentioned, and need to realize that just how much more your game needs to bump up just because you're doing good at where you're at right now. Once you get to that next level, man, it's all those people that came from there, same exact thing for them. So what's going to what's going to make you stand out from that? So with your experiences in college football, and we talked a little bit about this already, you're now currently working for or the business owner of 5-Star Football. I was very just looking into everything that you're doing. I think it's giving every college athlete looking to play football at a high level that third person background of you went through it before and you're starting to work with other people that have gone through it before, and just giving someone that intel and obviously the training process as well. I was just very watched all the videos and getting the guys to where you've gotten them to so far. So just give me a little kind of another background deal on what inspired you to run 5-Star Football, and what's your plan with it going forward?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, I started playing football at a very young age, so I wasn't overly intrigued in even playing college football until sophomore year. I'd seen my brother go and do big things. He was ahead of me. He always paved the way. Was going to summer camps and whatnot, and I was playing. I liked it, and then sophomore year came around. I did pretty well, and I was like, oh, I actually have a shot at doing this. I'm pretty aggressive. I can make some decent plays. I can get some good knockback, and those are just base level traits that any high school football player has to have to play college ball. So I was intrigued. It kind of grew in me like, hey, I actually want to play college football. And eventually, as I progressed later into my high school years, I'm like, I really want to go D1, maybe go to the NFL someday. So it really just stemmed from a me trying to figure it out on my own, being from Green, being from a school that graduated 60 kids in my class and had no help in the recruiting process. I literally remember Bryant University coming to school to talk to me, and my head coach wasn't there. Like, to even that, he's like, "Where's your head coach?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I'm sitting in the classroom, first period,
Yeah, they
like."
probably have no clue what to do, man. They've probably barely been through it before.
Right. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, he ended up leaving. He was like, we're very interested. But long story short is I had nobody to help me in the recruiting process, in training. I spent countless hours in the gym training like a bodybuilder, just doing things that were really not beneficial for me as a football player. Sure, they made me bigger, faster, stronger. But in terms of being an athlete, getting noticed, all of that stuff, I really had to figure it out on my own. It was a
Yeah,
very stressful process of me, again, like clawing, scraping, like, how do I go Division 1? How do I do this? What camps do I go to? My poor mom and I was dragging her across the country, making her spend all the money she didn't have, going to these different camps, doing this. I'm like, no, this is going to work. This is it. This is it. Had no idea what I was doing. So
yep,
a big model of how I structure my business is being the person who I wish I would have had when I was a high school athlete. So we do all
absolutely,
things high school
absolutely.
football. We help kids with training, we help kids with recruiting, and obviously we help kids who have the ability to play at the college level. We don't just help anybody. My ideal customer is the kid who I was in high school. Solid player, can make plays, but if we just give him the right resources, this kid's got a real legitimate shot of playing Division 1 and playing it at a high level. And that's really how I model my business. So anything that I could have done for my past self is what I like to do for kids these days. And I think that's why we have the success that we do have, is because it's very practical. We don't sell out for money. Our goal and our mission and our drive is to help those players like I was. So that's where the impact comes in, and that's how we're able to see kids have such transformative experiences with us, is because we're not like fully developing these kids. We're just pulling a couple levers in their life that they just have to change, changing how they're working out at the gym, changing what they're saying to coaches, changing how many coaches they're messaging.
Yeah, yep.
Little things like that. And those little things are what makes the biggest moves later down the line with consistency. So that is basically what we do. We do all things high school football training, again, recruitment, nutrition, anything that a high school football player needs. That's what we do.
Yeah, and that's great. And the very ending, when you said about just pulling a couple levers, you don't need to make a huge change in their lives. It's not like they got to completely do a 180 and everything's got to change in order to get yourself to that level. And like you said, having someone that went through that whole entire process and wish they had someone that at least gave that nudge and a couple of levers turned is it's a damn shame because there's so many athletes out there that could have used that, and unfortunately they either did not get the right amount of exposure, they did not get just that guidance in general of how to take care of themselves mentally and physically. So stuff like this, I think, just needs to be more and more adaptable to every sport, not just what you're doing. Like, I think all sports should have this. So with what we talked about, just being from Winnie Point, being from Green, very difficult being a small town kid, getting any types of looks. With your experience so far now, working and being part of Five Star, what kind of guidance do you give small town kids? Because obviously the level of competition, just in my mind, being a college coach now, yeah, you got to take into account who these kids are playing against, because some of these highlight films, some of these tapes, they look great. They look like an all-star, but then you dig a little deeper, you're like, man, they're playing this school that isn't too good, and on top of that, they're the only dude on their team in general, so they got to look for him more often anyways. So how are you, I know it's a long-ended question, but how are you able just to distinguish and give proper guidance to like a small town kid who there's more work to be done and they need more exposure, and also those kids that play at the high level high schools that might not get enough looks?
Right. Yeah, so the beautiful thing that we do is, again, we do all different aspects of high school football. So when we come across a kid who has the potential, but maybe he just isn't where he needs to be as an athlete right now, we can deploy the resources, the training programs right into his life so that, hey, this kid can go out and he can train like an athlete and he can actually make a genuine change in his athletic career, just like I did. I didn't grow up super athletic. I had to change how I was working out and change what I was doing to become a Division 1 athlete. And that was something I had to learn later. So we deploy that in high school kids now. So that's really our like baseline level offer. It's like, hey, we want to help you become a better football player. So once they have that down, that changes a lot of things. But when it comes to evaluations and it comes to finding these players and it comes to, hey, can this kid compete at the next level? First and foremost, everybody hates to talk about this, but measurables are insanely important at any college level, especially in the game of football. You have to meet a certain height and weight credential, especially weight credential, in order to be even considered to be a prospective athlete for college football. And it differs based on division, it differs based on position as well. But for the most part, there are measurables that you should want to achieve. And again, that range varies widely based on your position, based on where you're trying to play. Obviously, you're going to have bigger guys Division 1, you're going to have smaller guys Division 3. However, you still have to have the measurables to be able to play. So that's the baseline. Like, hey, does this kid have the measurables?
So
If
is
he has
that what you
the
kind of
measurables,
is that
great.
what you put at them first? Is that like your foundation? Is giving
Yes.
them the basic
So that's called
standards?
the eye test. That's the fastest way to do it. It's
That's
like,
the line.
hey,
Okay.
30-second evaluation, height, weight, GPA, and that's a whole other aspect. But like, does this kid have the measurables to play at the next level? So I have hundreds of kids, and I also have a full-time evaluator who does a lot of my evaluations for me. But like, we have hundreds of kids submitting evaluations. And I'm not a college coach. College coaches have thousands of kids every day submitting evaluations. So unfortunately, to say that they're going to watch every one of those tapes is just wrong. Especially, I don't know
Yeah,
what you
very
guys
unfair.
use, but huddle.com with their advertisements. I mean, it takes a long time. You got a 15-second advertisement every time, and I'm only watching 15 seconds of film to
Yeah.
discover of like, hey, if this kid's good or not. But when you're doing that, these coaches have to sort based on the measurables. And if you don't have the measurables, it's going to be very hard. Now, you can also say you don't meet the certain height and weight credentials, but you're a heck of an athlete. It's okay. Do you have the accolades to back up your athletic ability? So, hey, this kid's a first team All State running back. He's a little short. He's a little skinny, whatever. All right, we'll check him out if he's a first team All State running back. That's something that you can definitely do. Just be a great
Yeah.
athlete, and that's fine. Because at the end of the day, like, nobody wants to have the conversation about the measurables because it's something you really can't control outside of your weight,
Yeah.
outside of your GPA. But like the height is something that really matters, but it's really something that you can't control whatsoever. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Devontae
that's
Smith always comes to my mind about weight every
yeah.
time I'm talking about that. But continue, continue.
But yeah, so that's really the baseline of it. But now there's so many different opportunities for even small town kids like myself, and this is how I was able to get recruited at the level that I was and pick up so much interest is because I would go to camps and I would be surrounded by high level talent and I would still outcompete and outwork that talent. So now it's like, okay, well, we don't have the pads on, but this kid's hustling harder than everybody else. He's first in line. He really shows heart. He is winning one on ones. He actually has the skill. Now, okay, when he has the pads on, he's playing a lower level competition, but hey, he's got the measurables and he's also showing up and performing, outperforming some of our best talent. So there's a lot of opportunities for kids who are small town kids to go get in a competition pool that is higher than the one that they're naturally in. And I think that's imperative because you can, again, be a superstar. And if you're from a nowhere town and you never get out of that competition pool, one, your ceiling's only going to be so high. The beautiful part about high level competition is you're going to play up to competition. So getting out of the competition pool, putting it on tape against higher level competition is something that is also imperative outside of the measurable aspect of getting recruited as a small town guy.
Yeah, and that's a great point because you can whatever you have right in front of you as a small town kid, control that. Make sure you are at the highest of the levels and you're one of the top athletes in that division. And on top of that, you need to realize this might be a little unfair for myself, but don't feel bad for yourself and just go out and go find. There's always something available with these showcases, with the exposure now, with all the film. You can't feel bad for yourself being a kid that doesn't get exposure anymore. Go out and find it yourself. And talking about your mom, shout out to all the parents and guardians and family members that go out and help athletes with that because they're spending their weekends. I mean, I had about a month ago now. I had Jake Piscino, who's a professional lacrosse player, on, and talking about how his dad took him everywhere across the country and just thanking him now for what he's done. I mean, you got to do so much just to get that exposure and those looks, and it's insane to think about. But yeah, like I said, just can't feel bad for yourself if you're not getting looks, even if you're confident, you know you're doing the best you can. Got to go find, where everyone else is at and go right at them and not be afraid of that better
Right.
competition.
Yeah, and I think another thing too that I wish, and I don't think that I really would have struggled with it too much, but something that it might not be the easy way, but something that I try to do for a lot of players, and you obviously always have to come off in a loving manner, but like you got to be realistic, right? Because every parent thinks their kid's a superstar, and every kid thinks that they're a superstar. So if you're a small town kid and you're the best player on the team, that's great. You're the best player in the section, that's great. But again, you think that hey, I'm an Alabama level player when I can sit back and tell you right now, yes or no, that that's going to even be an option for you or not. You should always shoot for
Yeah,
the
they need to
stars.
hear it. They need to hear it from
Right.
someone.
Right. But if I spend all my time going at Alabama and I'm not getting any results, I'm going to sit back and say, hey, like, what's going on? I'm not getting recruited, whatever. You have to expand your options. That's the beautiful part about me playing Division 1, Division 2, and Division 3.
Yeah,
Granted, it was Division 1 FCS ball, which is AA ball, but still, the talent that is required for all of those is still elite talent.
Mhm.
Every kid that I played with on the Division 3 team was a very good football player. They were likely coming out of their high school being the best player on their team. So you have a team of all of the best players on the team because it is still extremely selective. There's over 1 million high school football players in the country every year, and there's only a few thousand that even go on to get to play college football. So if I can sit back and say, hey, man, I really think you're a Division 3 level player. I'm not shooting you down. I think that you should still try to go D1 if that's your dream.
Yeah, yeah,
However,
good way to word it.
if you at least know that in your heart and I can have a conversation with your parents and say, hey, this kid's a D3 level player, then we can be like, okay, let's focus on Division 3. Then it's like, oh, we're actually getting some results in recruiting. Versus I'm trying to message Division 1 coaches and they're not even watching my film because I don't even rank on their board in the measurables, in the 40, whatever that would be.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then I'm like, I'm not getting recruited. Then next thing you know, because your ego was in the way, you don't even get an opportunity to play college football because you weren't realistic enough in the process and you didn't seek a third party to tell you what they think that you can do genuinely and honestly.
Yeah, and this is said all the time. I'm pretty sure, and it needs to keep getting repeated. No matter if you're a college athlete and you know you're good enough to make it to the college level, accept and take on every single coach that reaches out to you, no matter what, because you just never know. And this is a little bit biased on my side because I'm a Division 3 coach and talking to players who think they're scholarship level, which some are, and they have proven that wrong. But no matter what, take on those calls, those texts, those emails from college coaches. Because a good experience, you don't know who they know. On top of that, once they start looking at you, they're like, this kid might be too good for us. Hey, coach, I know you from wherever. Here's this kid. So, and on top of that, like you telling a kid, hey, this is where I have you at right now. I have you at like a high academic D3. That doesn't mean that's your ceiling. That's just where you're at right now. And you can go beyond that. And if you're confident in yourself, you could get there. But that's the reality, especially from someone like you who has seen every level, have worked with players now, and have felt out the business and talked with other coaches. It just, you can't be sensitive as a recruit and an athlete in general because any outside word you get from someone, if you just kind of push it to the side, like, nope, I know I'm a high major D1 kid, I'm a D2 kid, I'm getting that scholarship no matter what, scholarship or bust. Like, you got to take everything on overall. And that's another good part, in my opinion, about your business currently is because those kids get a reality check. They help with the training, the exposure, etc. So, no, it's another great aspect to it. And another question that I did have. So you talked about when you were in showcases and you went out there and tried to just work harder than everyone else, and you knew that you might not have, had the highest vertical, didn't have the quickest 40, etc. What you see now with the kids that you're trying to get to whatever school they end up at, are you seeing these college coaches? I guess there's two options. Say there's two players laid out in front of them. You got player A, who say is very God given talent like, really quick, expresses a lot. And then maybe on top of that, though, off the field, a little grades are up and down. And on top of that, coachability wise, they're still questionable compared to a kid that's less athletic and gifted and not higher up on the charts physically, but they have all the credentials before that taken care of. Have you? Because what I've looked at as a coach, it's like, can I take this kid, even though their stuff off the court and or off the field is not taken care of just yet? Can I, as a coach, turn that around for them? Because holy shit, they're a really good athlete and their talent levels at a high level. So far from and how long have you been with 5 star now or ran 5 star?
About 2 years.
Okay, so in your 2 years, have you seen a situation where a kid at a high level might not get taken because of those off the field things, or coaches are confident that yeah, there's a couple things I can tweak about this kid as a person and as a student. I think still bring him to the program instead of taking this kid that competes harder, works harder, but doesn't have that talent level or athleticism.
Yeah, so I have a little bit of a real story. I have
Perfect. Perfect.
a junior high school football recruit. This kid is evaluated as a high level Division 1 recruit. He doesn't currently have any offers. He really doesn't have a lot of interest either because he really hasn't done a good job of the recruitment process on his end, which is something that you obviously have to do. Go into camps, reaching out to coaches. However, so I reached out to a high level Division 1 AA school. I have a good connection with them. And I sent them this kid and I said, hey, this kid is going to be a high level Division 1 player. And they said, okay, great. Send his information, send his transcripts, whatever. I sent him their transcripts and he had a 2.8 GPA. And immediately they said, he's got 2.8 GPA. We're not taking him. And this kid's a good kid. Like, this kid is a good ball player. But the problem is if you can't take care of the stuff that you physically can take care of, then how can I trust you to take care of the rest? And the truth is that the college football pool is continuing to be more selective. In the year 2025, all of these big time Division 1 schools are cutting 35 roster spots off of their roster. So they're going from about 150 scholarships or 150 spots to 115 spots.
Wow.
However, all of those 115 spots are going to be scholarships. So now you take preferred walk ons out of the equation. So that's a significant amount of
Well, yeah.
high level
Oh, yeah.
players in this pool who aren't going to be able to, who might not ever play college football again. But what it does is it just makes it more selective. So now, okay, I have player A, player B. Player A takes care of business, player B doesn't take care of business. I'm taking the player who takes care of business and who I can trust
They're
because
not going to take the risk.
right, they're not going to take the risk. And then if they do, the way that things work these days, college football is looking more and more like an NFL agency every single day we move forward. If you don't take care of business and I'm saying, hey, I only have 115 roster spots on my team, this kid keeps causing academic problems, this kid keeps causing other problems, this kid keeps showing up late to business, get him off my team and get the next guy in. And that's
Okay.
just how it's going to be. Nothing is guaranteed these days. So if you can take care of, I worded that wrong. There's certain things you can take care of: your height, or not your height, your weight, your nutrition, your GPA, how you're working out, your work ethic. You can take care of those things. Those are controllables. If you're not controlling the things that you can control on a regular basis, then I'm not going to be able to trust you. One, there are other case studies like, hey, this kid doesn't get it done. This kid's an Alabama level recruit. We'll take him. This kid's got unreal athleticism. This kid's coming to play ball at our school. This kid is going to be the next NFL. This kid's going to be next Ray Lewis. So we want him. There are two different equations, but for the most part, I don't deal with those kids. I
Okay.
deal with kids who are on the cusp of getting their first Division 1 offer, or maybe they have 2 or 3 Division 1 offers, but you have to have 20 plus to be able to skate under the hay. This kid doesn't take care of his grades.
Okay.
This kid,
That's what I was about to ask. Like, what's the baseline to that? I guess basically getting that pass of, hey, this kid's just good enough, and we gotta take him, and hopefully we can, we'll take a risk on him and see what he can do.
well, and it really matters on the program too. So if you're only going to see that at major Division 1 programs because the AA that I reached out to was ranked number 8 in the nation this year, and like that's a school like you would think that they wouldn't really care too much about GPA. No, it's not the case. But a school like Alabama, a school like Georgia Tech, they'll let kids fly under the radar, especially if it's a kid, like a once in a lifetime kid. They'll let them do that. But again, it just is completely unprofitable for you not to take care of business and that stuff. It's just going to do everything. It's just going to help you out in the future as well. So my recommendation to all student athletes is like, look, take care of what you can take care of because it's going to give you opportunities down the line, whether that's a D3 academic scholarship or whether that's an additional scholarship to your full scholarship. And now you're getting paid because you're really taking care of academics. And that happens a lot too. So, yeah, control what you can control.
Did you play any other sports in high school?
I played baseball.
Okay, so you got a little bit of feel with other sports as well. What do you think, just with these kids coming up, getting recruited, trying to go to the next level? What's the most difficult thing as a recruit in football compared to other sports?
That's a good question. I mean, I think the sheer fact that every college football roster has 100 plus guys on it, there's a lot of players. And again, they're very, very selective. I see a lot of kids who should get big time offers, don't get offers. I think getting to the right coach at the right time is imperative, and doing that on your own is very, very hard. And that's what we use to get a lot of our players on board. It's like, hey, you're going to have another person in your corner fighting for you. And that's obviously very important because we always encourage kids, do what you can do on your own. We're going to give you all the resources you need to go out there and get yourself recruited. But then we're going to do everything we can to get you recruited as well because you really never know. Every player, and it's really a different case study with each player. Again, that one kid who I coached in Binghamton who went down to Alabama, who now has just picked up his seventh Division I offer to Mississippi State. Like, if that kid stayed in Binghamton, he might only have one Division I offer coming out of high school. So it's really, really hard to gauge. And unfortunately, the way that the recruiting game works is there's an anomaly called the hype train. And the hype train is very, very real. You have kids who pick up 10 offers in 1 year who I don't think should have one, but some school decided that, hey, this kid
Ripple
is the right
effect.
fit for
Ripple
us,
effect. Yep.
and then he gets one offer, and then all the other schools, basically the recruiting process is like a Texas shootout. Everybody's pointing the guns. And then once the first person pulls the trigger, they're all pulling the triggers. So you have that happening a lot. And then on the contrary of that, you have kids who have 20 Division I connections of coaches saying, hey man, love the tape, love it, it's good stuff, doing really well, love it. That's why we try to be directional with our recruiting because we want to cut through that recruitment fluff, but you can get into a spot where it's a Texas shootout and nobody's pulling the trigger. And then next thing you know, you're going into senior year and you've played your senior season, and you're like, I'm good. I have all these coaches who are telling me they love me,
He's had a
but
pull
nobody
trigger.
ever pulls the trigger because they're just waiting on somebody else to do it. And then next thing you know, they're filled up on roster spots. They don't have a spot. So I don't know what the hardest thing is, but it's really a timing game, and it's really I don't want to say it's a game of chance, but it's varies very.
No, I feel like you answered the question. It's who's going to take a chance. If you did what you have to do and you thought you did enough, who's going to take the chance on you? And obviously, those are uncontrollables partially. Of if you did enough, some just started looking around like, all right, who's going to offer this kid first? Because that's a whole nother ball game. Of it is difficult to do. I'm assuming to be the first one to get on someone because in my opinion, and I want to hang our hats on this as a program recruiting wise. I want us being the first ones to see that kid or know about this kid or show some love to this kid or even take the chance on him. I'm hoping that means something to that recruit. And I don't know if that transfers over to the football, especially since there's so many players and with high major D1 to D2. But I think that's very important. A coach genuinely like looking at you and be like, I'm going to take a chance on you or I'm going to be the first one to offer you because yeah, it's a timing game, but also other coaches can just hop in after and once they see a couple offers, be like, oh, this kid, at least I'm safe now. Like this kid's not going to be a huge bust. Like at least it's like a lower, risk reward type of situation. So, yeah, no, I think taking a chance and having someone give you that look and that genuine feel for you is, yeah, it's got to be difficult too, especially when you hear I love it, good film. And like, all right, come on, let's go. Let's get it going. Pull the trigger then. So
I also had another recruit. He just picked up an offer from Syracuse last week. So this kid, he's a sophomore. He's a monster. Like he'll have good. He already has good scholarships. He had 5 scholarships before he picked up Syracuse, but he didn't have. So there's 2 levels when you look at big Division I football. You have G5 schools. You have P4 schools. G5 schools are the ones that you don't hear about. JMU, Liberty, like you don't really hear about them too much. P4 schools are the 4 major conferences: Big Ten, Big 12, SEC, ACC. So he had a couple in this spot right here, but nobody in the big P4s was pulling the trigger. He'd been on to visits to Clemson. He had been in talks with all these big schools: Virginia Tech, University of Virginia, because he's a Virginia guy. And I was talking to Syracuse, and they're like, "Hey, can we get him up on a visit?" And I'm like, "Look, if you can offer this kid, it will be meaningful." And I'm an upstate New York guy. I have always been a fan of Syracuse. I'm not saying I'm going to point him in some certain direction or not. And he has a lot of time left and he's going to get big schools.
Yeah,
But I'm
yeah.
like, he's from Virginia. Like, if he's going to go up there, you guys better not waste his time.
Make it worth his while. Yeah.
And sure enough, he went up there and they pulled the trigger on him. He got his first scholarship. But I think what you said is very impactful. So that was his first big scholarship. Like this kid's going to go to a big school. So
Yes. Now
I
let's see what
think
that ripple effect is like.
yeah, I think that Syracuse was smart in pulling the trigger on him because I do think that first scholarship, especially at the big level, no matter what level, is definitely meaningful as well because it's a trust thing. Like you
Yeah,
go
yeah,
on
yeah.
3 visits to
Absolutely.
Clemson and Clemson doesn't give you any direction. They say, "Hey man, we like it, we like it, we like it." Clearly they don't like it enough to pull the trigger and give you a scholarship. So there's obviously some level of miscommunication there. But yeah, no, I think that's definitely something that is huge and it is meaningful for sure. Um,
Yeah, trust in general at the higher levels are just so much more important than I thought now. Being a coach, every kid you coach, every coach you coach with, trust has to be up there. It has to be. I just look with everything going on, like trusting your player to do this, trusting when you're recruiting a player, trusting that that kid will be worth who you recruited for, etc. So that's some good stuff. So we'll take a quick break on just strictly football, and we talked about this a little bit, and there's just in general with athletics and the bigger picture of life. But you mentioned that you became a follower of Christ, and this wasn't your whole life. This was recently. So just give me how'd that go for you, and what was the process, and why is it now? And I see with the crew neck as well, they have the head on. Yep. So what? How to come across to you, and what do you recommend to other athletes now who could use that?
Yeah, so I always tell my guys this, I always tell my football players this because I think a lot of people do a really bad job, and I was one of these people before I really like jumped off the deep end. And it's it's using scripture, it's using Bible verses like out of context. So like with football players, for example, even all athletes, Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And I was like this for a while. Like God's going to allow me to go to the NFL so that I can be great because I'm chosen. And I just think that's a really bad mentality, and God's not going to do that for you. And I
Yeah,
tell my
right.
football players, God does not care about your football career. God does care about you becoming a trustworthy, faithful,
The best person
obedient
you could be.
servant. Right, exactly. So that was where it really changed for me. And I initially dipped my toe in the water when I went to Wagner. And again, I went from being the biggest person on the field in high school to one of the smallest on the field at Division I FCS Wagner. And I was seeing guys there that I had never I was like I didn't even know people could get this big. And that was Division I FCS ball. And what it did is it stirred up this crazy fear in me because we also had a strength conditioning coach who was wild. This guy would punish you if you were hurt or injured. If you were injured, he would make you carry 45-pound plates across the track all practice long. He would just put you through these crazy drills. So what stirred up in me was this monstrosity of this fear. And I was so fearful. I'd go to practice every day. I'm like, these people are huge. I'm going to get hurt. And I'm going to show up here every day at a school that I'm already not too pumped to be at. I don't really want to be here. I'm homesick. I feel horrible. I'm depressed. And if I get hurt on this field, I am going to be punished and I'm going to have to walk around the field all day with 45-pound plates. And then once my grip fails, I have to hold it over my head. And that's how crazy it was. So I had this crazy amount of fear and it ruled me for weeks, like all during fall camp. And I'm like, I had a Bible with me. I always grew up with a Bible. Nobody ever taught me the Bible. My dad, his parents went to church, but they weren't, too crazy. But he always knew, he was like, me and my brother always had a Bible. So I always had a Bible with me. And then I went through some traumatic losses when I was younger and my cousin had passed away and I was down in New Orleans at a football camp and I actually took the Bible from the hotel. Good Christian, me stealing the Bible.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I took their Bible because it was the only actual Bible. I only had a little one when I was a kid. So I took that actual Bible from the hotel, which hopefully that's what it was there for. It did its
Yep.
work in me. But anyway, so brought that home, went down to Wagner, was really fearful. And I'm like, I'm not living in fear anymore. Like, something needs to happen. Like, I'm too depressed. I literally hate it here. I really hate my life right now. I can't do this anymore. So I opened the Bible and the Bible I knew nothing about it. And it had these in the first couple of pages. It's like, read this if you're fearful. Read this if you need courage. Read this if blank,
Mm,
blank, blank.
mm.
So it would point you to certain scriptures. And then I would open it and I'd be like, Joshua 1:9, do not be afraid, be strong and courageous, the Lord is with you wherever you go. And I'm like, okay, like I always knew there was some God, like there was some higher power, some being who there was a reason why I was here. Like I'd never been an atheist. I could always look around and say like, hey, this place, there's something weird
There's a
going on here.
reason
There's got
why.
to be somebody
Yeah.
who's in charge. So I opened that and I would read that. Like Joshua 1:9 was a verse that always stuck with me. And I went to practice the next day and I'm like, I'm going to run with this. Like this says, do not be afraid. The Lord has a plan. So I'm going to run with that. So I went to practice and I'm like, fear's out the window. I'm like, fear, get away from me. I do not care. If I get hurt and I have to walk around the track with plates, it's because God has a plan for me and he's going to use it for good. So I was like, fear's out the window. I went to practice that day, balled out, went crazy. Like it was like a new step in my athletic ability because all of a sudden fear that was making me play slow and I'm a freshman, I didn't get many reps and I was like very like I don't know the playbook, I don't understand this stuff at all, to I go to practice the next day and I'm like I don't even care anymore. Like I am done. The Bible says do not be afraid. I don't know what that means, but I'm going to run with it. And I ran with it and I started making plays, started balling out. We had a JV game the next day, balled out, had like 10 tackles, and all of a sudden, I was like fourth on the depth chart, and the three people in front of me that day got hurt. And all of a sudden, I
Jesus.
went from having no play time whatsoever to I played the whole entire game. I had like 10 tackles. In that meeting, the team meeting we had that night right before the varsity game, the head coach was like, there was a couple people during the JV game who did very, very well, who we are moving up to varsity. And again, I went from like fourth string, I'm a preferred walk on, back of the line, to the head coach in this meeting. I had known really nobody at that point. The head coach in the meeting says, Isaac Hadac, you did a great job at that JV game. We're moving you up to varsity. You're suiting up tomorrow. And I'm like, whoa, like something worked.
Reflecting
And I
back.
was like, I just tried to do this on my own for 3 or 4 weeks and nothing worked whatsoever. So now I'm going back and I'm reading more, I'm finding more, I'm finding more, I'm finding more. I'm like, this is crazy. I keep doing it. I go to practice. I'm like, I'm not going to be fearful. I'm done. I'm not letting that rule my life. Come to find out that all fear comes from the devil, the enemy. So I'm like, I'm done with that. No more of that. So did very, very well athletically there the rest of my semester there. And then I ultimately ended up transferring because at the same time where I'm, coming to understand this Bible, I'm still going out on the weekends doing horrible things, like being a complete hypocrite. But besides the fact, I was like, this works. Something in here works. I'm transferring. I went to Ithaca College. I went there, still really in the same, like, still not doing great stuff. I'm still filled with pride and ego. I didn't lose that, but I did lose the fear. And I went to Ithaca, and then all of a sudden, COVID hit, and I was like, okay. I was able to take a step back. It was like pause. Like COVID worked out horribly for everybody, but for me, it worked out great. It was God was like pause, time out. Like we're
Yeah.
going too fast, and you need to settle down, and you need to see what's really going on. You need to see what you're doing to yourself, what you're doing to others around you. And I sat down and I started reading that thing more, and I started being like, okay, I started understanding who the God of the Bible was, which is revealed in Jesus in the New Testament. And I found forgiveness and I found life and salvation in Jesus. And I took that with me throughout the rest of my football career. And I was basically just got to the point where I'm like, I don't know if this is what you have planned for me, but if it is, let your will be done. And I just became completely obedient. And I always was like, it got to the point with me where I was like, I want to go to the NFL. One, so I can just help my mom do whatever she wants to do. She sacrificed so much for me. If I could have the money to get her a home and to do whatever she wanted, that'd be great. But two is because I want a platform to be able to speak your name. And sure enough, I now have a platform to speak his name that has to do with football, but it wasn't what I wanted it to be. And I think that's where a lot of people get caught up, is that we have our own plans. We think we know what's best for us, but God has the ultimate plan for us in our own lives. And now I'm able to sit back and do what I do, and I genuinely love it, man. And my whole life was, I remember telling people, I'd be like, if I don't go to the NFL, I'd rather die. I would rather die than not go to the NFL. I don't want to do anything else. I don't care about doing anything else. I'm going to the NFL. I don't care what it takes to get it done. I'm going to get it done. And sure enough, now I have a platform. I'm not in the NFL. All of my dreams fell apart, but I feel so full of his grace and his mercy, and like I genuinely feel like I'm walking in the purpose that he has for me in life, and there's no better feeling than.
Yeah, and there's a lot of good stuff to unpack there. For starters, from what I've heard so far, is that fear is one of like the top traits of being better controlled, which is there's like another main reason why I do this podcast and I enjoy it so much, because from talking with other people and just from experience, the mind and just how you go about things and what you envision, I don't think people realize how much they can actually envision once they realize they're not alone, and they can see a purpose to everything, and like not limit themselves and not control themselves on, like you said, like you were going to practice very fearful, worried about like the top three things you were worried about were negative things about, don't get hurt, don't do this, don't do that. So I think that's an awesome, and I'm still me personally, and I've always thought about too how what's the best way of convincing. I think a college kid is probably the hardest to convince, because like you said, you make irrational decisions as a college kid. You're still learning about yourself. So on top of all of that, how can you, because this should work for a lot of people, and this would be good for a lot of people to find their own way, their own path through Christ. And I think that story that we talked about a little bit before, and what you mentioned now, it's realizing truly and overall that you're not alone in anything you do. It's a very lonely, dark world sometimes in certain situations, and especially for your situation. I've mentioned this before, and we talk about it in our coaching program. We always talk about is that when you're at a place that you truly go there just because of the sport, it's a very dark, lonely world when the sport's not going well and you're not doing well yourself. So it all ties back to go to where you want to go as an athlete, and go there even if you were not playing the sport. Go there because you like it there, and it's not like solely based on the athletics. And also, when you are going through something, there's so many resources to use, that can help you mentally to get over anything that's a battle within yourself, because keeping it in there and letting it just slowly develop, and that just it's a scary thing once you get to a high level and don't do anything about it. No, that's a good. I like stories like that. And I was looking forward to hearing about how it came across to you. And like I said, I think it's pretty impressive that you came across it as a college kid. I feel like it usually happens before college and you grew up with it, or after college when you really become an adult and get into that. And I want to follow up with that with what is your, besides your own personal story, what is your biggest selling point if you want to help someone or convince someone to, follow the Bible verses, follow Jesus in general? What's something, especially a college kid, because they don't, there's a lot of things that they're just like, I don't need that right now or anything. But what's your side of things that can help convince someone to know that they could really use it?
Yeah, so I mean, outside of that, I think our testimony is one of the most important things, because you should be able to. I mean, I didn't really know you before. I didn't never had an interaction with you, but the people who knew me before then should be able to see a genuine change in my life from then to now. That's called being born again. But basically, my whole life, I always tried to do what was right, and I found myself failing at that often. Even though I wanted to do what was right, I just really couldn't carry it out. I couldn't do it all the time. And sometimes I would, sometimes I'd impress myself and be like, yeah, that was good stuff, man.
Hmm.
I always tried to like sit with people at lunch like who nobody would sit with, or have a conversation with somebody, or just the little things like that. But the main driver is that when you look at, eternity, and you look at us as human beings, and again, I wasn't born a Christian whatsoever, but I always had a concept of like, hey, there's a God. So when it comes to like trying to convince somebody there's a God, I don't have very good resources to deploy that, because me personally, I could look outside, look at that tree and say, wow, that's pretty crazy. I'm imagining that somebody made that. I don't think that was just an accident. When I
Yeah.
look at myself, I'm like, I don't really think that I was an accident by any means. I look pretty intelligently designed, and we have a pretty big, substantial purpose in this world. So that's very easy for me to understand. But now, when it comes to like, hey, I know that there's a God out there, I have that understanding fully. Like, then I can kind of be like, hey, well, I had the same problem myself, and I knew that there was a God, but I never had a relationship with said God. I was always like, yeah, there's something out there. But then I found out that through Jesus, that this God who did create the heavens and the earth actually cares and loves me specifically, because he went and died on a cross for my sins. And that was the whole kind of thing that I was trying to work at, is that even though I really tried to do the right things growing up all the time, and a lot of times I would do the right things and I would make the right decision, but I always found myself failing. And that failing was me always being like, I can never get this right, man. Like, I can never seem to get this right. I got to have 30 good days in a row and one bad day, and it just feel like everything fell apart.
Yeah.
And I was like, I just feel like there's nothing that I can do to get this right. Like, what is the purpose of life? What is the way to get to this purpose of life? What is the truth? I knew I always had a bigger plan, a bigger purpose, and I knew that there was a God. And then I read in the Bible one day, and it clicked in my head. It was that Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And I'm like, well, that's a pretty bold statement. You're going to claim to be the way, the truth, and the life. You really just answered three of my major questions that I've been battling and struggling with for many years, just trying to figure out, like, what is the purpose? What's the
Yeah.
way to this purpose? And what's the truth? And Jesus claimed that and all that. So it's like, okay, this opened my eyes. Like, let me not just say, oh, I'm just going to go believe that. Like, let me put in the research. And then it loops back to me saying, I always try to do what was right, but I continue to fall on my face, and that would never make me feel good. And then I realized that every other religion in the world is always about, what can you do for God? What can you do to be a good person? What can you do to gain merit? What can you do to go to heaven when you die? And Jesus says the opposite. Jesus says there's nothing good that you can do, but I, as God, am going to come to this earth as a man and live out a perfect life, the life that you could never live out, that you strive to live out on a daily basis. And I'm actually going to die on the cross for you. And I'm going to tell people the truth, and it's going to hurt, and it's going to be hard. And I read that, and I was like, so it's not about me and what I can do. And as soon as I was able to deny myself, pick up my cross and follow him, then that's when everything started to make sense in my life. And I'm like, okay, I've been trying for years to find this out myself. I've been scratching and clawing, trying to figure out the purposes. I'm trying to figure it out in the football field. I'm trying to figure it out in life too. I'm like, I'm growing up, like, what am I going to do? Why am I going to do this? Like, either nothing matters at all or every single thing matters. Like, I
Yeah.
don't understand the point. I don't understand how to get there. And when I found Jesus and him saying that it's about what he did and it's not about what I can do, I was like, that is actually very empowering. That's incredible, because I'd spent so many years just basically just throwing myself in a loop of depression, being like, I think I got it figured out. Nope, I fell on my face. I think I got it figured out. Nope, I fell on my face. And I did all the things that college kids do: go out, drinking, drugs, whatever, you name it. I've been
Yeah.
there, done that. And every single time I would participate in those activities, I would sit back, whether that was the next morning or what, and I would sit there and I would like stare at the ceiling and be like, why? Like, what what
Yeah.
what
What was the purpose of
what
that?
did I do that for? Why would I do that? What is the point of doing that? Like, this can't be the purpose of life, is going out every weekend looking for the next rush of serotonin to go through your brain. Like, this cannot be the purpose. Like, if it is, this isn't a life I want to live. And then all of a sudden I found out that, hey, denying yourself and everything that you want in this life is the way, the truth, and the life, because that's what Jesus did. He came to serve and not to he came not to serve but to be a servant. And that is what I switched my mindset into. And then life has just been, really, really a blessing ever since. And it hasn't been easy by any means. We've experienced some traumatic loss, ups and downs, failed
Yep,
businesses,
yep, yep.
dropping out of school, very hard times. But I am grounded in the fact that there is somebody there who cares about me, who already demonstrated his love for me, that has a plan for me, that wants me to know him. And that was what changed me, is because, again, I always knew there was a God, but I'm like, I don't have a relationship with this creator. I don't know what this creator wants from me. I don't know why I'm here. I always felt like I was living in like a simulation, and it was always very repetitive. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I really, when I came to Christ, I was like, I understand now. It really makes sense that I'm completely imperfect, that there's nothing that I could ever do to gain merit with God, and that He came and died, bled on a cross for my sins, and receiving Him and putting my faith into Him is what gives you eternal life. And the Bible says this is eternal life, that you would know the only true God and His Son Jesus Christ, whom He sent. And knowing Him is following Him, walking the narrow path, and that's a path of servitude.
Yeah. And just having that clarity in general, I can only imagine that jump for you once you did, it came full circle. There's a reason why these big time athletes now, when they're in these post game interviews or press conferences, a lot of them, they're just like, hey, man, before I say anything else, right? Like, I want to thank the Lord Jesus Christ. I want to thank the big man upstairs, you name it. There's a reason why these male and female athletes are claiming that, because they came to a similar situation, or even a different situation, but it came about in their own path, in their own way. So any athletes listening to this, this has to, the different athletes just going through whatever, or even before and after, just people in general that aren't even athletes. There's always something that I've seen or came across or talked to people about it, that it just got, it's a guiding light. It's a path where, like you said, there's going to be parts of the path that are just not going to be enjoyable. I think that's the beauty of it, and that's the stuff you gotta enjoy the most, because that type of challenge, if you never experience types of challenges like that, you don't experience the mistakes and failures, and did you do the most you can do? On top of that, with the servantship, like you mentioned, there's a lot to that
Yeah.
as well. And yeah, challenge.
My favorite Bible verse is Romans 8:28, and for this we know that God uses all things for good for those who love him and for those who are called according to his purpose. And I've been through so many traumatic losses, so many traumatic things in my life, and I can sit back now and say I'm glad that I went through those things. And so many people, if they heard of what these things that I've gone through, would be like, dude, you're crazy. Nobody would ever want to go through that. But I can sit back and say I'm glad, I'm blessed, and I'm thankful, because that led me to where I am today. And that's exactly the fulfillment of what that verse is. And then now I can go through additional suffering, because the
Yeah,
Bible promises nothing but future suffering. And that's something that all Christians have to deal with. But now when I go through suffering, I can rejoice in my sufferings, because I'm like, hey, this is going to, one, God is going to use this for good in my life, whether that's improving my discipline, improving my relationship with him, leaning more on him, finding new people, whatever the case may be. Anything that I've gone through has been used for good, and it will continue to be used as so. And that is something that really, really helped me out a lot too, because, again, so many traumatic experiences. This world is a world, it's passing away. Everybody everybody listening to this, everybody around, there's only one thing that I can promise for sure, and that's that we're all going to die. And you can sit back and say, oh, we're all going to die, nothing matters at all, I'm going to live life the way that I want to do it, I'm going to be selfish, I'm going to do whatever I want. Or you can say, hey, this life is quick, let's make the most of it, let's serve others, let's love our neighbor as ourselves, let's find the truth, let's seek the truth, let's spread the truth, and let's deny ourselves, and let's say, hey, we're looking for the next life after this, we're just passing through, we're here to make your life better. And that's genuinely how I live my life every day, and that has been the most freeing thing that I've ever experienced my entire life.
Yeah, and I'll bring it back to a Drake verse with Nicki Minaj. Everybody dies, not everybody lives. But no, that all that stuff too, in the freeing aspect as well, just like freeing yourself of a lot more of the worries that you have because there's so many. It's easy to worry about so many things in this world, and not having a clear vision, very difficult to go through. So awesome stuff. All this is great, and with a new segment I have, it's very basketball term like, but what I have here is called the one and one. So basically, one on one in basketball, the bonus. So there's like the bonus time. I want to give you one more kind of like topic and theme that me and you can both just go in about real quick, and something that I've thought about and talked with friends lately about. So, and this circles really, it circles back around what we talked about in these past 58 minutes.
Let's do it.
And that's about pressures off the field or off the court. How do you, in your own way, how do you go about not bringing it on to the court or to the field? Because myself as a coach, as a player, it's an issue sometimes. Or even even pressures with life and then bringing it into your workspace. Just anything in general that goes on in your side life that you bring into something important to you. How can you avoid it and go about it in a professional way? And my first take about it is that no matter what you bring on, I don't want to say it's like you need to bring on like two different faces to whatever you go about to. And I even watched a TV show about it before where I believe the show is about once you go into your workspace, your memory's wiped clean and it's only about what goes on in your work world. And then when you go back up the elevator, you go back into your normal life and you only remember what goes on in your normal life, not work. I think the overall message of it is that that would help a lot of people because they either bring those work stresses or athletic stresses into their personal life, and they bring their personal life into their work life slash athletic life. So overall, my thing is that strategy wise, you need to find a way. You need to find a way to either strategies, methods to work with people on it. Don't be alone, like we've talked about before, and have it and go about it in a very productive way that doesn't set you back. Because any type of conflict you deal with, if you bring that along with you, no one wants to see that or go through it themselves. At the end of the day, I know people are selfless sometimes and they listen very well, but do they really want to hear you rant about how your day is going today and what like the negative stuff is about? That you can only people can only hear so much because that's guess what, they're going through something too. So that's my take on it. I just want to hear what your thoughts on were, and I think why I like bringing this up to you as well because there's a lot of pressures with scholarship kids as well, and either the recruitment process or just being on a team but holding a scholarship, there's pressures with that as well, and you don't want to let that down. So yeah, I just want to hear your side of things on that before we
Yes.
wrap it all up.
When I was in my really all my football years and up until my last year at Assumption, it was almost like you were putting on like I was like putting on a fake face when I'd go to practice, but it was more like a practice or a game, and it would be like a mean be like basically like put on pride. Like I would go, I'd be mean, I'd be angry, and that's how I would just play better. And it got so exhausting for me to do that, and I was like, I hate pretending like I'm somebody I'm not. And this is also kind of coinciding with my growth in Jesus. And then when I got to Assumption, I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to have faith. I'm going to walk in the freedom that I truly believe in. And I want to be the same person here as when I get off this call and I go out into my kitchen. And that's something that I genuinely believe. And that's also what they call the fear of the Lord, by the way. It's fearing that you're always being watched and you're always being held accountable to a certain extent. So that's like me coming on here, I'm preaching about Jesus, and then I shut this computer and I go and swear at my wife and whatever. Like,
Yeah,
obviously,
yeah,
it's not good, but at the end of the day, you would never know about that stuff. So, my big thing that I switched to is I was like, hey, Isaac Haddock on the field, off the field, in the classroom, I want to be the same person because I'm
okay,
exhausted
okay,
going from this to this to this to this to this. It was almost like I had like a multiple personality disorder. Like in school, I was a different person. Off the field, I was a different person. And on the field, I was a different person. And it got so exhausting doing that. And I'm like, this isn't me. This isn't me at all. So I stopped doing that when I went to Assumption. And I really walked in that freedom and going back to when I was at Wagner and that fear that was on top of me. And I was able to get rid of it through the study of the scripture and through faith in Jesus. that same freedom, I was able to walk in on the field, and it allowed me to play at a level that I have never played before because I was fully confident, and then I was also completely free. Like, if I make a mistake, it's all good. I'm doing my best. I'm as prepared as I possibly can be. And that's something too. And I'm very big into the control what you can control aspect of life. So,
Yeah,
hey, I'm busting my butt off the field. I'm taking care of everything I can be taken care of. I'm hydrated. I'm fueled up. I'm good to go. I study my playbook. I know the plays. If I make a mistake, I can sit back and say, "Hey, man, let's
at
not
least I'm
make a
prepared
mistake
doing
again."
it.
You prepared your very best for this moment, and I think that when that fear comes in, it comes from a lack of preparation off the field, and it also comes from a lack of faith as well. So I have faith in my preparation. I also have faith that, hey, it's going to be all right. It's good. I'm not defined by football. If I make a mistake, it's all good. And I was able to go into Assumption my last year without this weight of like, hey, you are going to the NFL, you have to go to the NFL. And that is what allowed me to play a really an All American season. If you look at the stats from that season, it was unbelievable. I had some of the best stats in all Division II football. And it was because I was like, I'm not putting on a face, man. I was on the field, I was smiling with guys, I was laughing with guys, I was having fun.
Yep, yep, yep.
Completely the opposite of what I used to be. I used to be mean face, like, I'm gonna hurt you type of deal. And then I'm like, I'm on the field and I'm just free. And I'm like, I know this. This is good stuff. And I would make mistakes. But when I'd make mistakes, I'd be like, it's all good, man. Don't worry about it. If your coach yells at you, yes, sir, no, sir, good stuff. Your coach is gonna trust you. He's gonna say, all right, he's got it under control. He's well prepared. And I think that's something that every athlete can control is what they're doing off the field in order to gain confidence. And that's what I think that is where confidence comes from. And now, also, just a side note of that, and just in general life, going back to the suffering, going back to all these things, like, I really have a hard time waking up without a smile on my face because I know that this life is fleeting and passing away. And I also know, too, what Jesus did for me on the cross. So it doesn't matter if what I'm going through, if I'm struggling, if my car breaks down or whatever, like, yeah, those things suck, but like those things are always going to be there. And I genuinely
Yeah,
think we have a decision that we can make. It's like, is this going to control my day, or is this something I can't control that I'm just going to have faith that it's all going to be worked out? It's going to be good. That has never, ever led me astray. And I really, really take pride in like, hey, when I shut this computer and I'm here by myself, like, there's still somebody keeping tabs. So, I gotta be this person. I gotta be this person always.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
There's no other me anymore. And that has been also something that's been, very freeing for me. And I think that whole idea of trust the process is obviously a very good idea, but now you actually have to trust the process and what you put into the process.
Yeah, no, that's great, man. And especially with you playing both sides now, because sometimes it's worked for people partially when they've had two different phases on, like with their family and on the field. But for you, you found a way where if you say a consistent Isaac Haddock, no matter what, throughout the way, it just works better for you, and you don't need to change who you are and what you bring to the table, and you can't let anything that tries to drag you down. Don't let it, don't let it hang on your ankles, man. Just kick it off of you. Hey, this was awesome, man. Like I said, these always cruise by. We're an hour five in, just like that, and it was a breeze, man. Talking with you and then going over everything and getting. I really appreciate your perspective on what you've got because you've been here, you've been here, you've been here. So just getting a true feel for that, and just that's why I like doing this podcast is getting to know more stories and more experiences and how to go about things in a positive way. That's the beauty of it. So awesome, man. Well, Isaac Haddock, great experience, man. Thanks for hopping on, dude.
Appreciate it, Brady. Hey, God bless, my friend, and we'll talk soon. All right.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Salute.
Thank you to everyone who has taken the time out of their day to give the Pump podcast a listen. Please give us a follow on Instagram or TikTok at pump_pod. You can also tune in on our YouTube or Spotify channels. Last but not least, if you have any questions, comments, concerns on any of the episodes or future episodes coming up, please email harringtonpump@gmail.com. Once again, thank you for listening and hope you can tune in soon.